Hello, and welcome to another episode of Casting Views, a podcast hosted by myself, Dan, and my nephew Lou, where each week we pick a topic and, well, we cast views on it. Lou, before we get started, how's your day been?
Well, my day started actually to get a lot better since you got far got past the intro at last. if we could put in how many takes you just had.
I've had a pretty crappy day, right? I'm shattered. I've had about 2 hours sleep last night, and just for people listening, I don't know if the version that goes out will have this, but we've been recording for about a minute 40, and only about 40 seconds of those is the actual episode. I wanted to change the intro, and basically, anyway, I was going to say, remarkably, we were going to start bang on time because Lou hasn't had his headset issues for the first time in 3 weeks. I've got my mic set up, and then well, anyway, right, I'm just going to get straight into it. I wanted to have a little chit chat, but I'm annoyed now. The topic I want to talk this week, right, and I think it's going to be a good one. So initially, I wanted to say to us, let's keep it under an hour, but we could potentially be here for 3 hours. It's something that I almost don't care if you say you don't like it. I think everyone at some point has watched it and has got a memory. I want to talk about wrestling.
Wrestling.
Yeah. So you and I, we'll come on to it, but you and I, we've got some obviously shared experiences of wrestling, not of wrestling ourselves, but of wrestling the event.
Yeah. Because we've been to a couple of events
Yeah.
and that sort of thing. Yeah. I mean, I guess you'd probably want to start with like your earliest memories of wrestling. I think that yours will probably be a little bit earlier than mine because I think you probably started getting into wrestling probably a generation or two before I was. So I guess what are your like earliest memories of wrestling?
You see, I'm struggling to remember. Well, if I said earliest, it's going to actually be probably the British wrestling. So Giant Haystacks and Big Daddy. Do you remember?
Heard of? Can't say I've ever watched though.
Yeah, it was very, as you can imagine, for the 80s. Well, it's probably sort of 70s and 80s, very low budget and basic. But it did a job. But I think we're mainly going to be focusing on the wrestling from the States, right?
Yeah, the American stuff because that was the stuff of epic proportions. That
Yeah.
was. Let's be honest. If you weren't tuning in to WWE, SmackDown and Raw on a Monday and on
Well, hold on.
was it Monday and
I'm
Friday?
gonna stop you there because for me it was WWF.
Oh yeah. Well, I guess I might have just caught initially the WWF period, and then it would have skipped to the WWE as I was a kid. I think because I don't know when the switch actually happened.
No, I'm
But
not
I guess it would
sure.
have been like early 2000s, I think, is when it would have happened. I would have been pretty
And this is the
certain.
thing, and I was actually scratching my head, right, to think when I actually did start. So it would have been towards the late 80s, early 90s, because I think we got Sky Satellite at the time when it came to the UK. I think we had that in 88. So I'm sure
Okay.
I can't remember now if wrestling was on TV before then. So it would be late 80s, early 90s. I think it's going to be the cliche, but it would have been Hulk Hogan. The memories of like the wrestlers I really liked at the time, and I was actually talking to a friend at work today. It may be linked to a game I had on the Amiga, why it was these three, but for me, it was Hulk Hogan, the Ultimate Warrior, and the British Bulldog.
Ultimate Warrior with his rope shaking.
Yeah, and I've also have to throw in Macho Man Randy Savage as a fourth. I can't remember him being in this game I had.
Oh, hang on a minute. Was he the one that had that catchphrase where he was like, "Oh yeah"?
Oh
Was that him?
yeah,
Yeah,
and I think
that's it.
sorry,
See,
oh
I'm,
my
I'm
God,
about that generation as well.
I've offended a whole load of people with that. I think he actually did a rap album.
Yeah. You're actually right. Yeah.
And also, wasn't he in Spider-Man, the Tobey Maguire one? I think he was a wrestler. You know, when he's just starting out as Spider-Man and he goes to that wrestling, it's like underground wrestling
Oh
tournament.
yeah.
I
He is
think his
actually. That's
opponent,
a
yeah,
that's
yeah.
a really good shout. That is.
I
But
watched
you
it
know what?
again
As well, like
recently.
wrestlers back then as well were more like in film and TV. Like they were more a part of like popular culture at the time as well. Like a lot of wrestlers were proper mainstream names as opposed to being like what I would now see as like a bit of a kind of wrestling isn't just isn't what it was. I guess like everybody, like I said, used to watch wrestling. Even I've kind of tailed off nowadays. It's just not got the same interest for me. But yeah, like wrestlers back then were household names. I think of my generation. I remember Goldberg being in a lot.
Got him listed here.
He was in one of the things that I most distinctly remember him being in was, do you know the film Looney Tunes?
Oh, no, I'm not sure. I've seen that one.
Yeah, yeah, he was in the film Looney Tunes. It's like one of the generic, do you know, like in all of these like films from the like early to mid
Generic
2000s, they
henchman.
just needed, yeah, they needed generic bald evil man.
He's been in. I can't name it, but it's one of those ones. I remember we'll be watching something, and I'll say to the other half, "Oh, he's a wrestler. He was a wrestler," and it'll be Goldberg. It'll be one of them. They just seem to be extras, like you said, if they need big muscle man. That's what I was going to say. I think for me, the appeal to it when I was younger was that it was something so over the top, so very American, so over the top, so not British. And,
Yeah.
Hulk Hogan, for whatever he's been through recently, in recent years, he was just that typical, even his theme tune. And I'll come on to music and wrestling later,
Oh
but
God, yeah.
when you saw him, he just appeared to be like kind of like the Captain America of the sports world. Do you know what I mean?
But he was like Hulk Hogan. When you think about it, in that period of time, was a humongous celebrity name. Like the character, like he is, and this is the sad thing I think about wrestling nowadays. Is like, if you brought up, I mean, I couldn't name half of the Raw or SmackDown rosters nowadays,
Yeah.
nowadays either. But people, even if you didn't watch wrestling, knew who Hulk Hogan was. You
Yeah.
knew who Macho Man
Yes.
was. You knew who
Absolutely.
all these wrestlers were, and that really goes to show, I think, maybe how good the product was back then.
Mm. Well,
And I
I
call
mean,
it product because obviously, you can say sport, and I get it; it is athletic, but it was more so a product because it's entertainment, isn't it?
well,
That's
we'll
what it
also
is.
we'll also touch on that because I've got strong views about the whole debate about if it's not real, it's real, not real thing. I think I have to agree with you. And if we look back, they were household names. You're right. So even Andre the Giant, because he
Yeah,
was in
yeah,
The Princess Bride. Hulk Hogan was in Rocky 3. Obviously, I'm a great. I
yeah. He
I
was,
love
yeah.
the Rocky. He was on Rocky 3, and and he was great in that. And it was that classic. It's almost like what that fulfilled as well was like the playground argument about who would win, a boxer or a wrestler.
Yeah.
It was that. Yeah, Andre the Giant. I'm just trying to think. There must have been other kind of crossovers, but they didn't necessarily need to be publicized in other things because and I can reel off a load more wrestlers that people would have known. I mean, the Macho Man Randy Savage absolutely would have been known. I think Jake the Snake.
Oh, Jake the Snake. Yeah.
I've had a list now. I know these all span 80s and 90s, but before I do that, what was your first memory?
You know what? It would have been. I used to wake up really early on a Saturday, and that's when they used to show the reruns of SmackDown. And so I
Okay.
remember being really young. So this was probably when I was only like 7 or 8, and that was my earliest memories of like watching wrestling on TV, for instance. So like my generation would have been like your Eddie Guerreros, your the end of the Stone Cold era, your Kanes, your Undertakers, that sort of period was kind of mine. Like Triple H would have been a big one.
Yeah,
Shawn
the game.
Michaels. It was kind of after that whole like attitude era, the 90s, where it was all really like really out there, and the characters and the personalities were mad. That would have been my earliest kind of like stars, if you will. That was my kind of generation of wrestler initially. I remember, I think the WWE in the period that I watched it was at its most controversial because you had characters and you had some wrestlers, and I don't know if you want to go into like particular names straight away, but there were some gimmicks, is what they're called, obviously, for
Yeah,
anybody
yeah.
who's not privy to wrestling terms. Gimmicks is like the character or the persona that you put on. It's like your act almost. And there were some controversial ones. Do you ever remember Eugene?
Yeah, we saw him, didn't we, in London?
We saw him, yeah. I think it was Raw we went to see, wasn't
It
it?
it would have been because I remember Batista and thinking at the time, "My
Yeah,
God, that
Kane, I
man
think
is a
as well.
mountain."
Oh
Batista,
yeah, he
my
was a
God.
mammoth of a man, like unbelievably
'Cause
big.
your dad's quite tall as well. He's what? He's got to be
Yeah,
6'2", 6'1",
yeah, yeah,
something
six
like that.
two, yeah,
And I remember it was me, you, and him, and we were sitting a fair way back, but clear enough to see everyone. And they're coming down the gangway, and I think even your dad said, "Bloody hell, he's a big bloke, isn't he?" And I remember he
yeah,
just stood
yeah.
he stood above everyone. And Batista at the time, I think that was why I was going to say I think I like the big powerhouses, but then we'll come on to it. One of my favourites was also Rey Mysterio, and another one who I
Rey
won't mention at the
Mysterio.
moment because he had a brilliant gimmick, but. But yeah, sorry, carry on.
Yeah, it would have been Raw. But yeah, I think that generation was the one that I kind of got into. But yeah, I think some of the gimmicks at the time when they were like they were, I think I really kind of got into WWE when it was at its most offensive. Like Eugene's gimmick, and his whole persona was basically a bloke with severe learning disabilities.
Yeah,
Basically, there's actually no
you
other
couldn't
way
do
of
that
saying it,
now.
really.
You
Yeah,
wouldn't do it
no
now,
chance at
and you
all.
shouldn't do it now.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah. Well, you shouldn't do it now. Like there was another one who was like Nightmare Fuel. Do you ever remember the Boogeyman?
Yes, yes. Was he the one that ate the worms? No.
Yeah. Now,
Oh,
for
he was.
anybody
Yeah,
watching
yeah,
that doesn't know who the Boogeyman was, he was a character whose whole gimmick was that he was some psychopathic ghoul-like figure, and he genuinely did eat live worms on the way to the ring.
yeah,
And I
yeah.
always remember being horrifically terrified. Like I genuinely hated watching matches with him. And you know what? I even hated playing against him in the games because he terrified me that much when I was young. Like I genuinely was that scared. Like I would skip matches if I had to play him, even in like SmackDown versus Raw
Cover
or
your
like
eyes
Here
for the
Comes the Pain.
cutscenes.
That I could. Oh no, yeah, I couldn't handle it. But do you know what it was as well? I think that because I was growing up and because I was into games, the games also factored into my liking of WWE because you watched it, you played the games, you got even more familiar with the characters. It's a bit like what people do with football. You watch football on a
Yeah,
Saturday, you
yeah,
play a
yeah,
game of
yeah,
FIFA.
yeah.
And that's probably my earliest experiences, early games, and then that kind of like 02 to 05 generation
Yeah.
maybe.
See, for me, and the thing is, this won't be an exhaustive list because there'd be too many to go through. But I made a list of some of the ones I remember. So I think the earlier ones, or from the earlier time, would have been it's Hulk Hogan, Macho Man, Ultimate Warrior, Andre the Giant, British Bulldog. We've all mentioned those, or we've mentioned those already. But the Honky Tonk Man,
Honky Tonk Man, yeah, he used to carry a guitar around.
yeah, Jake the Snake, Million Dollar Man, Ted DiBiase,
Oh yeah, he was like the arrogant bastard that he created
yeah.
his own belt, and then also had like a like a servant or something that walked around with him, didn't he?
Possibly, I can't remember. I just remember. I think if I remember right, he had like a big fur coat, and yeah, the belt wasn't it like
Yeah,
a dollar sign but made of diamonds? I think.
the $1 million championship.
Yeah, the Road Warriors.
Oh God, yeah, a Warrior and Hawk.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Hacksaw Jim Duggan,
Oh yeah, Jim Duggan. Was he the one that came to the ring with a piece of wood in his hand, like a 2x4?
2x4. Yeah, that's him.
Yeah, I'm good
And
with
we,
my wrestling knowledge, I tell you.
and we mentioned Ric Flair, and then towards I say more modern, but it would be like the 90s and more probably into your time would be like Bret Hart, the Dudley Boys.
Oh, the Dudley Boy. At the tables.
This one, not I never particularly liked him, but I just found him a funny gimmick in the sense of Rob Van Dam,
Oh yeah, Rob Van Dam was great. He was proper high flying.
Big Boss Man.
Yeah, he was one that dressed up as a copper, wasn't he?
Yeah,
Or like a bounty hunter type thing.
it
I
was.
think it
Well, I
was
think
his.
he was a policeman with the truncheon. We'll leave it there.
Sorry. Before we move on from him,
Yeah, yeah.
can we talk about? Wasn't he the one that, like, in the ring again? WWE, why they thought it was a good storyline at the time, because you're never going to do it nowadays, like you say. Wasn't he the one that hung the Undertaker?
Oh God, I don't remember
I
that.
think
My
that they
memory is awful.
legitimately. I think that I'm pretty sure it was Big Boss Man, and I can't remember if it was at WrestleMania, where basically Undertaker had come through a match, and then he gets like either ambushed or something by Big Boss Man, and they basically string the Undertaker up and make it look like he's hung. Or I can't remember if it was Big Boss Man that was hung by the Undertaker,
I
but
may have
one or
been
the
that
other
way.
ways, it was something like that. It was ridiculous.
Let's run through a few others. We've I know we haven't mentioned Edge and Chris Jericho.
Oh God, Edge, you think you know me? This is great.
Goldberg you've mentioned and Triple H.
Oh yeah.
Oh, one of my favourite, Big Show.
Oh yeah, Big Show was brilliant just because he was gigantic.
He was absolutely gigantic. He's actually a slight diversion. Have you seen his Netflix show?
I haven't actually.
It's a fun little, it's very inoffensive, but it's got the Big Show in, so I'm going to watch it, right? And he's actually all right in it. This one, I know your reaction to this. Mick Foley,
Oh, Mick Foley. Mick Foley was brilliant, but
or what was
he
it,
had like
Buddy Love?
multiple characters
Was
as
it
well.
Buddy
Yeah,
Love?
that's
Buddy
it.
Love? And there was
Dude
one
Love.
Dude Love.
Dude Love
Sorry,
and Mankind.
Mankind. That's it. Mankind was like
Mankind.
the evil one,
The
wasn't it?
psychopath.
Yeah,
Yeah. He
yeah,
was like a psychopath,
yeah.
basically.
And didn't he have as Dude Love? Wasn't it the sock puppet?
No. So I think it was as Yeah, I think it was just as Mick Foley. He had Mr. Socko.
I mean, one of the things actually I should have said is I'm not going to profess to be an expert on this. I just have always loved dipping in and out of wrestling. I love it.
Yeah, yeah.
Th-
It's like one of those things that you pick up for a couple of years, then drop
yeah,
out of, then come back to.
yeah. I wouldn't necessarily be able to tell you all the move lists or storylines, but sorry, I just want to get through a few more of these. We've said Triple H, the one and only The Rock.
The Rock. Unbelievable. Big, one of the biggest names in wrestling by far. And for any of you lot that are listening to this that think his name is Dwayne Johnson, no, it's not. It's The Rock. He is The Rock. He started as The Rock. He will always be The Rock, because guess what?
What?
It doesn't matter what you think. There's going to be some people that are listening to this that are just sitting there like, I've
Yeah.
got no fucking idea what's going on right now.
Can you smell what casting views are podcasting? Well, we're having fun anyway.
Yeah, if you're listening, just entertain yourselves.
Now, the thing about The Rock, right, is he was just pure charisma, wasn't he, on the mic?
Yeah,
He's
yeah.
just, his promos were just, and I think that's exactly what it was. I mean, you can go back and look at it now, and they can be electrifying.
I think The Rock, though, as well, was one character that was actually bigger than wrestling, if that makes sense.
Yeah,
He was almost
yeah,
the show in and of itself.
yeah.
And so when you lose The Rock as a character, as a personality, as a wrestler in your show,
Yeah.
like as he did do and move on to film, I feel like that was a huge loss for
There's
wrestling.
definitely something that's gone missing, and it kind of shows that whether you like his films or not, he's doing really well. I mean, we literally
Yeah.
just watched the it's called Red Notice, the one that's just come out on Netflix.
Unbelievable. I watched it literally 2 nights ago.
And it's good fun. It's really good fun.
It is, yeah.
You know, and I think he's great. There is something so likable about him. You know, like I said, for me, if it's got The Rock in it or Dwayne Johnson, even if it's not a particularly great film, I'm going to enjoy it just for his presence.
Yeah, it's an easy watch.
Jumanji, especially the first one, brilliant.
Yeah, yeah.
And sorry, we'll come back to all these. I just want to throw a few more at you. We've mentioned The Undertaker and Kane, which was a really interesting storyline when Kane was introduced, you know, the brother.
Yeah, the whole brothers. That was brilliant. Even those two in and of themselves were proper
Yeah,
legends. They were.
absolutely. Stone Cold, Steve Austin,
Oh, just speaks for himself.
Rey Mysterio, which you mentioned. Did I mention Shawn Michaels? There's a couple more that weren't on my list that I do want to mention. Well, we've kind of said Batista, but also Booker T.
Oh, Booker T, five-time WWE champion.
Kurt Angle. And again, I kind of like Kurt Angle because I followed him over to TNA, and I think I was probably one of the few people that liked TNA wrestling. And Brock Lesnar.
Oh, Brock Lesnar. I mean, again, when you think about like men that are actually not built like humans, he actually is an animal. Like it's unbelievable, that man. I remember when he first came into WWE, he was again just a humongous mass of muscle. That's all he was.
He was literally, he was like a monster, wasn't he? He was just huge.
Yeah.
He was like the evil person, wasn't he? He was the big heel.
Yeah, yeah.
And he
yeah.
was just built for that role. And
just manhandling other men.
yeah, we were, you know, we mentioned the games. I mean, even though I'm not, you know, I've never professed to be a huge fan of wrestling. I've got a real soft spot and a weakness for the wrestling games. And you and I, we mentioned it in the gaming one. We've played a few on the old PlayStations, and even now I still like, for as buggy and glitchy as they are, I still love a good sort of WWE 2K wrestling game.
Yeah, that's true, to be fair. I think the last one I had was probably 2018. I still enjoyed it, to be fair, as much as, like, you know, the characters, as much as the wrestlers aren't the ones that you knew, like, you end up just using the legends section because you're like, yeah, this is what I know.
Yeah, but let's get the, you know, the obvious conversation out of the way quickly. So, like, the, you know, the whole debate about, well, it may not have been so much when you were younger, but like the whole it's fake, right?
Yeah.
I think part of me I almost, you know, and I still don't care it's fake now. I think part of me always did think it was scripted, but I didn't care. And it's
Yeah.
like the people that say now, oh, it's fake, or why would you watch that? Or, oh my God, how pathetic, watch wrestling. I would say, well, I don't watch soaps. There's a lot of people that watch soaps. That's not real. EastEnders isn't real.
Yeah. Like, obviously, in terms of obviously like athleticism and stuff like that, I think there's always been a case for the fact that it is actually very athletic, and wrestlers do legitimately get hurt.
No, but that's actually what I wanted to say. I couldn't care less if it was scripted, but what they do, sometimes what they can pull off in that ring, call it choreography for want of a better word, but it is amazing what they do. They do put their bodies on the line.
Yeah, this is what I mean. And there's been proper legitimate injuries, like Mick Foley. We just talked about. He actually had part of his ear ripped off,
Yeah.
like doing a bit where he basically got choked by ropes. I mean, when you look at some of the incidences, again, we got to bring up another name just because I feel like he came back to WWE in the last kind of 4 or 5 years. Was Shane McMahon.
Weirdly, when you were saying that, I said, yeah, I was thinking he had his testicles electrocuted by The Undertaker or Kane, didn't he? So,
Yeah, he actually did. But when you think about it, Shane McMahon wasn't actually even a proper wrestler, and he was doing some crazy shit in terms of throwing himself off of humongous heights. Like, as much as, yeah, the tables are there to break your fall, with him being thrown off the top of a Hell in a Cell, which is like 25 foot or whatever it is in the air, like, there's only so much dampening a plastic announcer's table can do to that impact. Like, people do genuinely get legitimately hurt. I mean, Edge had to retire, I think, because of the fractures to his necks and to his neck and that sort of thing.
or Kurt Angle as well. I know when he was young, he damaged his neck. And sometimes it's hard to know what was real from fiction in terms of the story as well. But apparently his neck was really getting bad late on. That's why they were saying, I think the excuse or the reason why he went to TNA.
Yeah, yeah. Because I think actually Kurt Angle's whole gimmick as well was he was an Olympic gold medalist, but I think the whole story behind his broken neck was he actually won his gold medal with like fractured
That's right. Yeah.
like vertebrae or something like that, didn't he? So I think there's always been a case for that. But the way that I always described it to people now, in reality, I probably haven't been properly into wrestling since maybe 2016/17. Do you know when Undertaker lost his streak to Brock Lesnar?
All right. Yep.
That was probably the last WrestleMania I properly watched out and out, and then I kind of dabbled here and there, and then kind of lost interest, if I'm honest. But the way that I always described it to people was, it's a bit just like reality TV. That's how you have to take it. It's reality television, and it's a bit like Your Only Way is Essex, except instead of talking in the middle of a cafe about who cheated on who, they're having a pretend scrap in the middle of a ring and jumping about. That's really what it is. It's reality TV, but athletic.
You imagine, like, Big Brother, but instead of having to do a trial or like, I'm a celebrity, get me out of here, they just beat the crap out
They
of
have a
each
ladder
other.
match.
Yeah, yeah, they have a ladder match. But going back to Shane McMahon, yeah, absolutely. That's why I've liked him, because I can't, I'll be honest, I never really saw him wrestle much because he was very much a bit parter in that sense, wasn't he? I saw the one you referenced a few years ago, yeah, where he jumps off the top of the cell onto the announcer's table.
Yeah.
I got nosebleed watching him go that high, man, from the TV.
That's what I mean. Watching that pay per view got fucking vertigo.
And the thing is, right, yes, you could see under the announce table the inflatable bag, because guess what? He's not going to survive that if he jumps off with no dampening. But like you said,
This is the thing.
I ruptured a disc in my back just doing some stuff in the garden the other day. He's throwing himself off set, off set 25 foot up in the air. I ain't doing that. Even with a massive like inflatable bag under me. I did love him when he came back. Sorry, with like the whole the money gimmick. The sneakers, the trainers, the little dance, the shimmy
Yeah,
as he came in. It
even
was
his
so much
song's
fun.
brilliant. Like, I can't lie, his theme song, "Here Comes the Money," was actually in a playlist of mine for years because it's actually a great song as well, to be honest. But yeah, his whole gimmick's great. I mean, Vince McMahon in and of himself has like dabbled in wrestling, and obviously I mean, he must be nearing 80 years old now. I don't know how old he is. Even he's a pretty big bloke, and he's
Yeah.
pretty competent in the ring as well, to be fair.
But he used to love an episode where he come out with just a string vest on, though, didn't he? And
Oh God,
flexing the
yeah, he
guns.
did. You know what? Right, somehow I feel like when we talk about wrestling, we're going to talk about controversy a lot because the storylines are so mental.
Yeah.
Vince McMahon legitimately had a wrestling match with God.
Yes, I've
Do you
got
ever
that.
remember
Yeah,
that?
no, I've actually got that here. I've got that here. It was Shane and Vince versus HBK and God. Yeah.
And that was to play on the fact that like Shawn Michaels was like a Christian and they were like taking the piss out of his religion. I genuinely do not know how. I mean, obviously, if you were a writer at WWE at the time, you basically could never say no to Vince McMahon. You probably
Yeah.
still can't. So obviously, it would have been his idea. But the fact that that's even been able to pass is actually mad. Like the fact that you can go and watch that on YouTube is a
Yeah.
bit nuts.
Yeah, because I looked at some of the more sort of either strange or controversial stories, and yeah, it was someone was saying that they heard rumblings that they were trying to get Bret Hart to team with the Heartbreak Kid, but it fell through. So what they said instead, they were treated to weeks of Vince saying he was more powerful than God, and they literally went to church to prove it. And during the match they used a beam of light to represent God. Again, I'm not sure you could probably do that now, but there are some. I'll throw a couple of other ones. Or did you have? Or did you want to mention a couple of others?
No, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry, but I actually can't get over it because you know what? Vince McMahon is responsible for some of the most ridiculous like storyline scandals you've ever seen. Like, you genuinely couldn't have had like the most budget of filmmakers come up with storylines like Vince McMahon did.
But I think that's what appealed. Not necessarily some of these I'll go on to, but the fact that could you imagine now watching football or soccer? Um, But yeah, instead of it just being the two teams, in between, in the build-up, you've got Liverpool, like Jurgen Klopp and, I don't know, Ole Gunnar Solskjaer calling each other out and, sort of attacking each other in the car park before the games. I mean, and I think
Jurgen Klopp just busts into Ole Gunnar Solskjaer's press conference with a chair, like.
or like, a trash can just hits him on the head. And I think that's what made it watchable for a lot of people. I mean, I kind of miss some of the craziest storylines. I mean, like I said, I've picked a few. I mean, we could be here all night if we went through the strangest storylines. I'll throw some at you, and you can either say if you knew them or what you thought of them. But I'm sure you probably would have remembered Mr. McMahon's illegitimate son.
Oh God, yeah, yeah. I remember that whole storyline. I remember that whole storyline. I think I'm pretty certain. Wasn't it to be something to do with Triple H? And I think there was something to do with Mr. Kennedy as well, the one that used to get on the microphone. And I think
I
I
think
don't
it
know if
was
you were
Mr.
going to
Kennedy.
say it.
Yeah,
It was Mr. Kennedy, but then it turned out to be something like who was the? Oh my God, he was a little person,
yeah, Hornswoggle.
played like a leprechaun. Hornswoggle, that was it. Didn't it turn out that Hornswoggle was his illegitimate son?
Yeah, that's what I did. And again, I can't remember why, but I'm not sure if it's because Mr. Kennedy moved or something like that. But yeah, it ended up being Hornswoggle. Yeah.
Oh my God. Yeah, that one was actually mad at the time. Yeah, but I think I remember rightly. I think you remembered that right. I think Mr. Kennedy was supposed to be central to the storyline, and I think he left because he fell out of favor for something that happened backstage.
Mm.
And then I think they needed someone to take his place, and in the end it was Hornswoggle, which was again a horrific way to end the
Yeah.
storyline. It was just stupid.
That
But
doesn't surprise me about that because the feeling you do get is that is basically it's what Vince says or it's his way or the highway.
yeah, yeah.
Okay, this one you may have heard of, and one of the things actually I was going to say was I think wrestling has always been good to feature, and especially now, kind of like promote the women's side of the sport. But I think it has previously been exploitative. Let's say that in the
Yeah,
early
oh
days,
yeah.
anyway. We know the kind of matches they used to have, and there was. It's actually I never saw it live, but it's quite what's the word? That scene with him and Trish Stratus in the ring where
I
he
know, yeah, I know exactly the storyline you're talking
uncomfortable
about.
viewing.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's really uncomfortable viewing watching that, which, again, you don't have now, thankfully. I only mention that because there's this one. Do you know the story about Katie Vick? It's
Oh, I don't
it's
think I've heard
probably
this
one
one.
you'll have seen the name, but again, it was about Kane. I think it was when Triple H was the world heavyweight holder. There was a storyline put up for Kane's past, and this Katie Vick was a woman that Kane was supposed to have been romantically involved with
Right,
until
right.
she died, and he was there when she died.
Oh, yeah, I know where you're going. Oh my God.
And then yeah, instead of that being the end of this experience, Triple H accuses Kane of sexually assaulting Katie Vick's dead body, even going so far as to don a Kane mask and reenact the scene for a shocked WWE audience. I mean,
Oh my God, yeah, yeah. Oh my God.
looking at some of these, do you think it's a case of where people are just getting together and just saying random things and there's no filter? They just, there's no morality or no
Well,
sensible filter. Someone to say, no, no, Vince, you can't have that.
well, do you know what the weird thing is? I don't know if it was just constant shock factor. So like, I don't know if WWE were constantly going for storylines that like we need to shock people and make people like either disgusted or angry or this, because I feel like that's really a way a lot of the stories went. I mean, even the Trish Stratus one that you mentioned, I know which one you were talking about. And again, for anybody that is not known anything about wrestling or was never interested, well, thank you for tuning in for this
Yeah,
long. But also to give you some context, it was where he'd made Trish Stratus like, was it strip to like underwear and then like bark like a
act like
dog
a
or
dog,
something like that
basically.
in the middle
Yeah,
of a
yeah,
ring?
yeah. Yeah.
It was really, really strange. And I mean, again, like it doesn't really promote anything for
She
storyline.
was
I
a great
mean, yeah,
wrestler as
this
well, and that
one,
was the thing about
yeah,
that.
she
She
was a
was a
good
great
wrestler.
wrestler,
She
yeah.
was, yeah. But yeah, that one I remember because it was Triple H, yeah, in a coffin, and didn't he pick up like what was like was
The
supposed to look
body,
like
yeah.
fake human brains or
Oh,
something out of like this coffin? Really weird,
it
really
really is.
weird.
This next one, I'd never heard of, but I included it because it is really bizarre. And at one point, I was thinking, was I being trolled by this? But there was a picture, but about Val Venus getting castrated.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah,
I'd never
yeah,
heard of
yeah.
that. I'd never heard of that.
If I remember rightly, it was basically something to do with it like infidelity storyline or something like that with Val Venus involved.
Yeah,
And then basically he gets almost like kidnapped and castrated. I'm pretty sure there's video of it, but I don't think it. Obviously, I think if you go to WWE.com, I don't think you're going to see it on their site. So it's probably going to be a YouTube. But yeah, I think it was like with a samurai sword or something, wasn't
I
it?
think you're right. And basically, it was the last, it was the last image seen on an episode of Monday Night Raw. But then the week after, and actually Raw being the word, I guess. The week after, Val said he, sorry, cut. No, not cut either. My God. Oh, jeez. I just get on with the story, Dan. This, and then the week after, Val said he was fined due to a little shrinkage and made a John Wayne Bobbitt joke. I mean, this is no more accidental cut or slice
Oh my
jokes, all right?
god! Oh, how did they let us watch this when we were kids? Like my parents definitely. Oh, could you imagine if your parents see? Like, I must have been. I couldn't have been old when these storylines were going on. Like my mum and dad never thought to check on me when I was watching WWE when I was young because they would have been fucking horrified.
Another one was about Mae Young giving birth to her hand.
And Mae Young was like
Yeah.
75 or
Do you wanna
80 or something at
give
the
your
time, wasn't
memories do
she?
you wanna give your memories of that?
You know what? I think this is one of the ones that I'm not as strong with. I remember storylines with Mae Young, but if I'm being honest, I only remember the storyline with her and Devon Dudley. I don't know if the pregnancy with the hand has anything to do with that one, but I remember there was a period where like Devon Dudley, I'm sorry, not Devon, Bubba Ray Dudley had like basically thrown Mae Young off of a stage in a wheelchair, and she was like 70 years old. But the hand storyline, I can't remember who it was related to.
Again, I kind of just got a couple of snippets because I'm not sure I wanted to find out more. But yeah, it was Mae Young and Mark Henry made a lot of people feel uneasy together. However, WWE, of course, didn't leave it to just that. They had Mae Young be pregnant, which she was going to have a child, and we all watched in horror as we wait to see a rubber hand the size of an adult be revealed, covered in a weird petroleum jelly-like substance. I mean, that is the stuff of
What the fuck?
nightmares. I mean, I don't think even horror films get that that twisted.
I love how in all of that storyline, the most like the thing about her giving birth at like 75 or 80 is the most realistic thing in that storyline.
Yeah, they didn't even mention that because that was like the best bit about it, or the less offensive. And then I really like Rey Mysterio, and I think it was just because he was a proper high flyer, wasn't he? You know, what was it? Was it
Yeah, yeah.
oh, I can't remember. Was it the 519 or
619.
619? That's it. You see, I
Who's
told
that
you.
jumping out the sky?
Oh God,
Why? Oh
yeah,
my god, I've got all the theme songs in
yeah.
my head now. This is
And
ridiculous.
I just think because he was absolutely superb, and he you know I'm sure he botched some, but he was like he nailed it every time, and it was just you couldn't follow him because he was just all over the place. It wasn't the story that Eddie was Ray's son's dad?
Yeah, so I think there was a story that basically Eddie Guerrero had fathered Rey Mysterio's son, and then Rey Mysterio had like taken care of him to like pretend that he was his dad, basically, because Rey couldn't have kids. I think that's the way the story went.
And they had a
But yeah,
paternity match,
that's the
didn't
way it's
they?
set
Didn't they
up.
have a paternity
Yeah.
match? I mean, come on.
Oh no, it was for the no, it was a custody of ladder
Sorry,
match
that's it.
where they had to put a ladder up in the middle of the ring and claim a suitcase with custody papers in it.
That was the beauty of wrestling. You don't even have to wrestle for belts anymore. You wrestle for children. You wrestle for all sorts of things. I mean, and it was funny. There was Well, I say similar. There was a similar one in TNA. Did you really watch TNA? I remember I bought you the game, didn't I? Which was quite bad, I think, on the
Oh
PlayStation.
yeah, yeah. The TNA games were always a little bit lacking compared to the WWE one. You could tell which company was doing better. If I'm being honest, I never really got into TNA. I saw a couple of the crossovers because I know the Dudley Boys went to TNA for a period, or at least Bubba Ray did. A cut like Cody Rhodes, I think, as well at a later date went over. So I only kind of tuned in occasionally, but it was never something that I kept up with, to be honest with you.
No, the only reason I bring them up is, and we'll talk about, I'll talk about TNA a little bit actually later for a personal thing, because AJ Styles was in it at the time, and
Yeah,
he was also really. I mean, I know he's in WWE again now, but I remember AJ Styles was another good high flyer. He was being there was this woman kept appearing. I think she's called Claire Lynch, and she was saying that he was the father of a child, and she kept appearing at matches saying, like you're the father of my baby, blah blah blah. But then it turned out, and I can't remember. I think it either made him wrestle badly, or he lost, or he had to sign something over. And then it turned out to be, I think, was it Kazarian? Do you remember Kazarian? Frankie
oh,
Kazarian.
the name really rings a bell, but I couldn't picture him.
And I think you then saw scenes where I think they either knocked AJ Styles out or he was drunk, and then she would then crawl into the bed and take pictures of her with him to make it look like they'd slept together. And it was just again, it was just another messed up kind of storyline. And that's just the tip of the iceberg, not the Goldberg. This is just tip of the iceberg with the kind of crazy storylines. Do you know what I mean?
You know what? One's just kind of come into my head while you've been talking about it. It's another WWE storyline. Do you ever remember the wrestler Snitsky?
Yeah, that definitely rings a bell. Yeah, yeah.
And there was like, now if I remember this rightly, again, you know what? People, if anybody remembers these storylines, do send us a tweet as well, telling us how much you remember. But wasn't there a storyline where he like punted a baby?
Yes, there was. Yes, if it was him,
Where
I
like
can't
he
remember,
was
but
like,
yes, there
yeah,
definitely
in the
was. Yeah,
ring, and he just like boots someone's child. And I don't know if
yeah.
it had anything to do with. Do you remember? You know, this is another huge scandal. Edge and Lita's sex show in the middle of the
Yes,
ring.
yes, yes. Because wasn't she with
God, where
Matt
they
Hardy at the time?
Yeah, she was, but that was a story
Yeah.
that was actually real life that got brought into wrestling. So I think
Oh
she
man.
was with Matt Hardy in real life. She cheated on him with Edge, and then the WWE made it a fucking
I mean,
storyline and put them all in the
that's
middle of
just
it.
unreal, isn't it? It's just unreal. I mean, oh god, it's like there were literally
Imagine
no
that.
limits.
Imagine your significant other cheating on you, and then your employer makes you live it out at work.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, 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 thank you. It was like yeah, that they had the romp in the middle of the ring, didn't they? Was it under a sheet?
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
Oh my god! And I'm pretty sure that the whole kicking the baby thing, um, was it's a good thing, you know, it's a good thing we don't have ads because we'd definitely be demonetized for this episode. But I think the whole kicking the baby thing, I think it was Lita and Edge's baby, if I remember rightly,
Uh,
something to do with
I
them
don't
anyway.
remember.
But
I don't
God,
remember.
unbelievable.
But some other things then that came to mind was, there were kind of some other funny wrestlers or gimmicky wrestlers, and one that the first one that came to mind because it was just his finishing move was just nonsensical was Scotty Too Hotty. Do you remember Scotty Too Hotty?
Scotty Too Hotty and the Worm.
Yeah, that was it. I mean, firstly, it took him about 5 minutes to do it, didn't it? But I don't get how that he had any power in the end of that to actually for it to be effective. I mean, when you've got like the people's elbow and the F5, and then you've got the worm.
Because he used to hop, didn't he? He used to hop round the
That's
ring,
it
and
in
that
a
was like a 30
circle.
second
Yeah,
setup.
yeah.
And then he used to do the worm, and then he used to stand up, do a dance, and then hit you with like his forearm almost. I was just like, all right, well, I mean, I guess in some alternate reality, it's probably super painful. But you know what? I don't know if you've got him on your list down somewhere, but one of Scotty Too Hotty's partners in crime was Rikishi.
Oh yes, yeah, yeah, yeah. I haven't got him on the list, but
And
yeah,
his finishing move was the stink face.
yeah. And it is literally
where
as what it says on the tin, right?
Yeah, now I'm pretty sure Rikishi is a Samoan guy, isn't he? But he's a very big, just Samoan dude, basically, rather large guy. And his finishing move was basically where he would sit you down in the corner of the ring, and he would ride his tights up his ass crack, and then he would just wipe his wipe his ass with your face. Basically,
Pretty
was
much.
how it was. Yeah, there's no other real way to describe it. I don't think.
But I remember there was also, do you remember Rosie?
Rosie. Oh, I'm
the
not sure,
big
you know.
guy. He was like well, if you work out the acronym, it doesn't take a lot. He was a superhero in training.
Oh gosh, yeah, I remember him.
Yeah,
Yeah,
so
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Rosie the shit, which again, probably someone probably had a great giggle when they did that, and then actually put it in. I mean, that's the thing. I had Papa Shango and the Boogeyman, like you said. But and this was one I think I showed you recently when I came around to your house and showed you on YouTube, the Shockmaster. Do you remember that? The promo where he had to bust through the wall. He had like it looked like a glittery stormtrooper's helmet, and it was
Yeah, yeah,
famous
yeah,
for
yeah.
falling through a wall and then the helmet comes off. Yeah.
Oh my god, unbelievable! That, you know what, as well, that's the thing, because WWE was like recorded live. You actually did get moments that were just completely unscripted
Yeah,
and crap like that,
yeah.
like people legitimately making horrific mistakes live on camera, and there's nowhere to go.
Yeah, and that's exactly it. You know, the amount of mistakes. I'm going to embarrass myself saying it, but there's a famous one about he's trying to say like, you know, you've got half a brain, but he was saying, I've got half a brain, and he was basically ended up insulting himself. I'll have to find it later, but
Psycho Sid, that
that's
was it.
it.
It was
Yeah,
Psycho Sid.
can you remember how it
Like
went?
I said, where it was just like it's something like, oh, if I've even got half the brain you have, then I something, yeah, it's something
I'm
where it's
gonna
just like
find
you've
it
got half a
because
brain or I've got half a brain.
I'm gonna have to find it because it's brilliant. Should we talk about the music because you've mentioned it a couple of times, and the music is almost just as iconic, isn't it, as the wrestlers?
Yeah, I tell you what, then, if you were to give me your favorite WWE entrance theme ever, what would it be?
I don't think I could say favourite. Because you had go back to the Ultimate Warrior where he just comes pelting into the ring. He comes running and then he grabs the top rope and he starts shaking it. To me, that'll be iconic. If you then go into late ones, we mentioned it, Rey Mysterio. I think that was great. But the one that I think sends goosebumps because you don't even have to hear the music. It's just the sound of that
Yeah,
breaking glass. The Stone
yeah, the
Cold Steve
glass
Austin.
break,
Yeah, that.
so iconic. And then you see him storming down the ring with a beer in one hand and a can of whoop ass in the other.
Yeah, yeah. But the funny thing about
I
him was
think,
his early days. You know, you see pictures of him in his early days.
yeah, he was, because he had a gimmick originally that was the ringmaster, wasn't it?
Yeah, I think he was. He was like really like almost like a Beach Boy kind of thing, wasn't he?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Like, and then I'm so glad that the whole Stone Cold thing took off. Could you imagine if we'd have never seen that? But yeah, the glass break, you just immediately knew, and that's what it was. Like, so I think some of the best theme tunes are the ones that don't take you that long to recognize. So
Absolutely.
I think that if I had to pick a song that was my favorite, I think it would be either Shawn Michaels,
Okay.
because
Yep.
it's because I'm a
Yeah. Yeah.
sexy boy, that one there,
Yeah.
or it would have to be Triple H, the game.
Yes, actually, for the whole thing as well.
Yeah, because that initial boom,
Yeah.
time to play
Yeah.
the game, like it was unbelievable. Because I think, was it what were the name of the group that sung it? Was it Motorhead? Is that what
Oh,
they were called?
God, I don't remember. It sounds like them, but whether it was them. But
Yeah, it
with
was
him, with
Motorhead.
that intro as well, it was also, you know, where he swigs the water, then spits the water out. It's the whole. It's like stop what you're doing. You're watching me come into the ring.
Yeah, and you know what? I don't care what anyone says. Anybody that's that's watched wrestling or watched wrestling during that period, you have definitely gone into your bathroom and or your kitchen, or if you've been on a sports field or whatever it is, you've swigged that water and you spat it out like Triple H at some point in your life. Everyone's done it. If you ever watched wrestling when you were young, I don't believe you if you say that you haven't.
But that's it. You know, like you said, I think it's those ones where you know within the first, literally first couple of seconds who's coming out. Which it was even better during things like the Royal Rumble, wasn't it? Where they would come out every minute or so.
I don't know what it is, and you know what? People that have been listening to this for what is like 50 minutes now are going to
Oh
be.
God, has it
It's
been that long
sinful that we
already?
haven't mentioned him. It has been that long, but it's going to be sinful that we haven't mentioned him. John Cena.
Oh my God. Oh, I love John Cena as well.
We have not mentioned John Cena once during this whole 50 minutes,
Oh, I
because
love
he
you.
had
Yeah.
probably as well some of the best Royal Rumble entrances, some of the most iconic music and iconic moments. You can see me,
In
like
a-
the whole 5 star knuckle shuffle.
The
I remember
professor of
the thing is as
economics.
well. Oh my god, the Professor of Thugonomics was brilliant because he recorded all of his own songs as well, didn't he? He used to come out and do like a rap to like insult his opponent pre-match. Unbelievable. That was brilliant. Brilliant. What a time to be alive,
Oh,
eh?
and John Cena in the he's acting now, isn't he? So most
Yeah,
notably in
yeah, that's true. I mean,
Transformers.
he's doing slightly lower quality films than your Rocks and your Batistas,
Well,
but he's
he did
getting there.
Bumblebee, didn't he? Was it Bumble? It was Bumblebee, yeah, the Transformers, which
Oh,
is
I never
probably the
watched it because
best
I heard it was crap.
Transformer. No, 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 Bumblebee's good. It's set in the 80s, so it's awesome.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Oh, you're right. Yeah, yeah. Well, you know.
And actually, Batista, yeah, I mean, we mentioned him. You know, he's done some really good films, wasn't he? Was in a James Bond, wasn't he?
Yeah, he was in Spectre, I believe. Most famously, you'd know him as Drax in Guardians of the Galaxy.
Absolutely. He
Um,
was in Blade Runner 2049.
oh, I've not seen that. I've not seen that.
Yeah, and he's actually again, he's good on screen. I think
Yeah,
I mean,
he's
he's
actually
nailed Drax. He's nailed Drax.
yeah, he's actually quite talented. To be fair, I was actually quite impressed. I think he was in was it Escape Plan as well? One of like the Escape Plan
I
films
swear,
with
I'm not seeing that.
Schwarzenegger and Stallone as well. I think I'm pretty sure he was in one of them.
There was a thing recently. We talk about sort of music as well, but CM Punk came back to AEW wrestling, and I think when
Oh
his
God,
when his theme popped again, you know, the way the crowd reacted, it's just, yeah, it's those moments. It's you know, it can get you, and music is powerful anyway. When you associate it specifically to a wrestler, it's just great.
yeah, because I think his was Cult of Personality was the song. And do you know what's mad,
Yes,
right?
yes.
Is I could listen to a song on the radio every day because that's what the charts are like, and not know the name to a song. But a wrestler who I watched like 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 years ago, I could recite their song in an instant because that's how iconic they were to me.
I remember actually liking, and I'm not going to pronounce it right, so you know, I'm going to apologize now. But was it Shinsuke Nakamura?
Oh, Shinsuke
I
Nakamura.
loved
His
his
was like a
entrance.
violin
Yeah,
intro, wasn't it?
yeah, but he just got
Yeah,
well
yeah,
into
yeah.
that entrance, didn't he? It was, again, it's the whole entrance. He's not just walking in. You know, he's playing
Yeah.
that whole part.
You know what? Before we move on from theme songs, I think we need to talk about an experience that we obviously had.
Yes, yes, let's do
Um,
that because I can't believe it's
because there's
53
an
minutes.
iconic moment.
Oh, here we go.
We obviously
Here
went
we go.
to. We've seen a couple of WWE. Well, we've been to WWE. I think was it only once we went to WWE,
Yeah,
and that was in
that was
London,
once. Yeah,
and that was either at Wembley or like the O2 or something, wasn't it?
yeah, one of those. I can't remember.
It was one of the
Wembley. I
two in
think it
any
was
case,
Wembley.
anyway. And then we went to a house show, like when I was not a house show, but like an amateur show when I was really, really young. That was probably the first like live event that I went to. And then more recently, now I can't remember what year this would have been, but I definitely would have been out of uni. So it could have been no earlier than probably 2018 in reality, could it? But you'd said to me as well that there was like a wrestling show going on really, really close to where we live. And
Yeah,
obviously, it was only a small venue. It was only like 750
yeah.
people or something like that, like
Southside
a little British
Wrestling, they were
promotion.
called, I think.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, yeah, yeah. That was it. And obviously, it's done at like a little kind of like hall, I guess, near us. It's not a massive place.
Yeah.
And you said that there were going to be some like WWE stars there. Now, if I remember rightly, it was Hardcore Holly
Yep.
and oh my god, I can't. Oh my god, man, his name's just
There was
slipped out of my
two more. There
mind.
was
Please
actually
help me.
two others. There was
Oh, Billy Gunn,
yep,
Billy Gunn,
yep.
who's the one we're going to talk about, and I can't remember who was the third one.
D'Lo Brown.
D'Lo
Yeah,
Brown. Yeah,
D'Lo
yeah,
Brown.
that's
Yeah,
it. That's it. And to go on and talk about how iconic music is, I remember when Billy Gunn came out, there was a group of probably 7 or 8 lads who just screamed his theme tune for probably 5 or 6 minutes, even after the music had stopped.
yeah.
I remember there was just guys stood up right next to the ring, belting out Billy Gunn's "I'm an ass man." Ooh.
Actually, he couldn't stop laughing, Billy Gunn, could he? Because they were trying to get on with the match, but people were just calling him an ass man all the time.
And I remember as well, I think he actually got on the mic at one point and said, "In all of my years of doing this, no one's ever done that for me."
There was also there was another wrestler there, and I can't remember his name now, but he was in TNA, but he was like his gimmick, at least in TNA, was that he was kind of like an Ibiza DJ. And I think he actually hurt himself there. I think he did. He was going to do one of these things where he was going to jump off the top rope, but I think he slipped and fell and ended up with like his back on the edge of the ring. because a lot of it was, well, call it amateur wrestling, but that I don't think that's necessarily the right term. Yeah, you had Billy Gunn. I think every match was a corker in that, wasn't it? It was just really good fun.
Yeah, yeah, it was brilliant. I remember at one point they like fought through the audience, so they were just like two
Yeah,
dudes pretending to
that's
beat
right.
each
Yeah,
other up like in the aisle right next to
yeah,
us,
that's right. Yeah,
and we were like, "Yeah,
yeah.
this is awesome."
I thought when you said a story, I thought you were going to say the other one from that tiny amateur one in our hometown.
Oh my! No, okay, right. I remember this one. So it was again. It was an even smaller show, and you know what? You'll have to tell me how many people you think were there because I do not remember it being many at all.
If it was more than like 30, I think I think that was probably
You would
about.
have been impressed,
Yeah,
yeah. And
yeah.
obviously, three of them were me, you, and my dad.
I went because I was kind of more into wrestling, and it was Jake the Snake was there. Now we'll come on to some of
Yeah,
the sadder things, but that was during his in between his prime and before he got kind of rehabilitated. So we'll mention it
yeah,
after.
yeah,
But Jake the
yeah.
Snake was there, and that was the draw, right?
Yeah, yeah. So he was like the big name that almost kind of was the draw for the show. But I remember there was an instance of a female wrestler in this show, and obviously because it was a really small venue, like the fans got into it. And I remember you getting quite into it, and I remember you like mouthing off to this female wrestler, and she just gave it back to you
Hold
like
on,
she
hold
didn't
on.
steal you.
Before you make me out to be some horrible person. No, what it was. So I remember. I think it was as I could say. So you were very young at the time. I think you were not shy, but as you were young, I think you didn't used to really get into things.
Yeah,
So I went one, just like I kind of would say I took your sister to Comic Cons because I was taking her and it was me geeking out at the Comic Cons. I said, yeah, I'll go with you to this wrestling because I love wrestling, right? But I was kind of like trying to be the cheerleader for you to get into the matches, right? And so what I did, I remember, the good guys, I was like cheering and then she comes out, she's the obvious heel, right? And everyone's booing. And she comes right past us. So I'm like trying to get you to do it right. I'm like going boo and sticking my thumb down at her. So I wasn't mouthing her off and swearing, but I was going boo. And obviously, because we're in literally like a town hall, she could hear it as she comes over to me, right? And I'm looking at you, expecting you to be putting your thumbs down, and you're just sitting there quiet as she comes over and starts pretending, "You boo me, I'm gonna beat you up. I'll show you a lesson." And I look around, and you're pissing yourself laughing at that. You're not getting into the fact, when I was booing her, right? You're laughing at the fact that I'm being like bullied and ridiculed by like this wrestler. I then slunk into my seat and stayed quiet for the rest of the night.
yeah. Just for context, obviously, in terms of having off, it was all part of the show and like the
Yeah.
whole like oh they're a heel, so you need to boo them and that sort of thing. But it's just so funny that she made you part of the show.
Yeah, I think I took it. I think I made it a bit louder. And yeah, that's right. She comes right up to me, finger in the face. Like, you boo me. Like, yeah. It was brilliant. But then it's like when I looked at you and you're laughing at that, and it's like, yeah, you had my back in a fight there, didn't you?
Amazing,
But
amazing.
yeah, we did then see. I mean, do you remember seeing Jake the Snake, right? Don't you?
I do. If I remember rightly, I caught him and he was kind of sat down on like a step almost.
Yeah.
His memories are very, very faded because I was so young at the time. But I remember there being like a rip-off Undertaker and that sort of thing there.
Yeah.
But yeah,
Yeah.
I remember you saying about Jake the Snake in terms of him, just him at the time and what he was
I,
like.
I remember basically his whole fight was, and I felt bad, but he was actually being booed, right? Because I think his fight was just him in the corner, literally sitting down in the corner for about 5 minutes, just being beaten up by his opponent for him then just to pull off one move to win. And I think people were booing because I just don't think they realised kind of how bad a state he was.
Yeah, yeah,
But obviously he's turned that round now, and I think it kind of does lead us on then to kind of some other tragedies. We mentioned Eddie Guerrero. I think it was last week actually, wasn't it?
yeah.
About celebrities. But you've obviously got it was Owen Hart, wasn't it, who died?
Yeah, he died in the ring. So I think the way it went was that he'd actually fallen. He was
Yeah,
supposed to rappel
yeah,
down from like the rafters. I think his harness broke and he actually hit his head on one of the turnbuckles and died from his injuries. I'm pretty sure.
yeah. Which I remember at the time being horrifically sad. And whatever your take on it, and well, I don't mean your take on it, but like how he's obviously been scrubbed out of history. But you had the whole Chris Benoit.
Yeah, yeah. Chris Benoit. I mean, WWE have actually it's not that they've tried to erase him. It's just that obviously what he did was unforgivable. So you
Yeah,
can't obviously promote him in any way. But obviously he was proper peak of his powers really at the time. When you think about it, he was somebody who was actually at the top of the
he
game.
was. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Obviously, I think most people will know who Chris Benoit was, but obviously just for a bit of context, I guess he was a wrestler who'd basically gone out and murdered his wife and child. I don't think there's any other way to kind of put that. But and then he'd also killed himself. And I mean, obviously, it was put down to a lot. I think afterwards they did autopsies and that sort of thing, and discovered he'd had like significant damage to his brain, and it was kind of put down to the damage that he'd had during the ring. Because I think one of his moves was he'd jump off like the top rope and like headbutt someone.
Mm, mm.
And obviously, while it's all fake, you're supposed to miss and that sort of thing. Inevitably, there's going to be a level of trauma that you receive as a result of doing that so many times, because potentially, you're never going to get off scot free with it every time you do it. But yeah, I think that's probably one of the worst tragedies, and it's true. I think that Chris Benoit will never ever be forgiven for what he did. But it did really kind of shed a bad light on WWE in terms of kind of care for wrestlers. So I think even previous to that, they'd had steroid scandal as well.
Well, that's the thing. Steroids had been an ever-present rumor or undercurrent throughout for many years, And
Yeah,
didn't that
yeah.
lead to,
'Cause
didn't in like the 2000s they then brought in that wellness policy?
Yeah, they did, because I don't know if you remember this, but there was actually a court case that Hulk Hogan was involved in, and Hulk Hogan, I believe, was actually due to testify against the WWE in court regarding Vince McMahon supplying his wrestlers with steroids, and then he actually backed down at one point. So again, I think there were rumors at the time that Hulk Hogan doesn't want to burn bridges, basically, but at the same time, the damage was already done. And I mean, when you look at wrestlers, if we're being perfectly honest, so many of them die at 50. Like, you look at
Yeah,
how many of them have actually died so
yeah.
young. Like, Eddie Guerrero died of like an enlarged heart, which is also partially the consequence of steroid abuse for so many years, because the guy wasn't tall, but he was humongous in terms of muscle.
And I haven't written them down, but I made a list here that so many wrestlers have died under 40, the age of 40. And this goes back to what we said, they're putting themselves on the line. I'm sure painkillers probably come into play as well,
Yeah,
probably
yeah,
addictions,
yeah.
concussions. I mean, and I think in a couple of the brands they still do it, but you remember they used to cut themselves, they used to blade themselves. Do you remember for all the blood?
Yeah, yeah, they did. Oh god, I can't remember what his name was. I think his name in the ring was Abdullah the Butcher. And I don't know if you've ever seen pictures, and I think you could probably Google this, obviously, if you're listening. Abdullah the Butcher was a wrestler known for like his like really like hardcore matches and that sort of thing. And he's actually just got permanent scarring on his forehead, so deep where basically he's taken razor blades and dug them into his forehead for the purposes of bleeding in match. And there were so many wrestlers that had it, because I think, if I remember rightly, I listened to someone speaking about how you do it correctly. So I think the way that you were supposed to do it was you were supposed to put the blade to your brow, and you were supposed to touch bone. So what would happen is if you cut there, you wouldn't have a scar that left, because basically the tissue would grow back correctly. But with a lot of wrestlers from kind of the 90s and earlier on, they all did it kind of just across their heads in any way, shape, or form, and they were left with horrific
Even that
scarring.
statement though, he was explaining how to do it properly. He was explaining how to cut yourself to bleed in a
Yeah,
ring
yeah,
properly. I mean, that
yeah,
you just you shudder to think now. I mean, we're talking about this, and you've seen all the promotions and stuff where you've got the thumbtacks and they're throwing themselves down on the thumbtacks. And the thing, if we go back to kind of like the more wrestling-y side of thing, and I'm sure I've said this to you before. The one thing that we were talking about reality, the immersion in it. The one thing that always still gets me every time they do it right. So when they're doing these promotions, they're outside the ring. They get punched punched once and they're down and they're stretchered, or they get beaten up by
yeah.
two or three of them. They get stretchered to hospital. They're out for a week. But in the ring, they're being hit with sledgehammers. They're being hit in the head with metal chairs. They're being hit on the heads with trash cans. They're taking off, the covering of the turnbuckles are being thrown into that. They're being chucked off the top of cells. They're falling off ladders. The old stick. I can't. I don't know what else to say. But they take all that. Oh, they three finishing moves. They kick three finishing moves. They'll kick out. But yeah, if it happens outside the ring, they're badly injured and they don't wrestle for a month. And that always
It
gets me. I
is
think
true.
it's brilliant.
It's like there's nothing weaker in the world than a WWE referee. Because the moment a referee even gets shoulder barged, that guy's
Yeah.
unconscious. He's unconscious 10 minutes. He's on the floor. He needs a stretcher out. He doesn't wake up. People get hit with chairs behind his back. That's just the way it works. It's a bit like the whole adage of stormtroopers being really crap
Yeah.
at aiming. There's only a couple of things that are guaranteed. Stormtroopers being crap at aiming is one of them, and WWE referees being weak as hell is another one.
Weak as hell only when the face is about to get a pin. That's what you got to remember with
Yeah,
that.
basically, yeah.
The other thing about wrestling was then when they did like the tag teams and the stables, and it was almost like a super
Yeah.
team, and that was great, and you'd have the sly little things like when one of the tag teams in the ring, the other person outside would like pull the leg back of the person as they're running to make them fall over. There were the sly little tricks, it was fun to watch because it angered you or it made you laugh if you were a fan.
Do you know what it is as well, right? Is obviously you talked about TNA and obviously you didn't go, that wasn't very long ago that you went to Florida to watch and you saw TNA, is it? I mean, in terms of,
Yeah, it was probably about 2015, 26, no later than 2016. Yeah.
because obviously like even WWE figures of, in terms of actually being at live events have been dropping through the floor. What is it, do you think, that's kind of killed wrestling? And when I say that, I mean, when you look at like the 90s and early 2000s, when you look at the WrestleManias and the venues that they genuinely packed out, and they probably still sell out WrestleMania because it's just the flagship in it, people go. But why do you think that generally speaking, WWE isn't mainstream anymore?
I don't know. I haven't watched it properly for a while. Now, the frustrating thing was I finally get round to getting Sky Sports last year, and it's actually gone to BT Sports now. But I kind of got back into watching the highlights, and I don't know if COVID has had an effect on this. There just doesn't seem to be anyone that I look at and think, oh, that's a star, that's a person that's attracting me to this. I
Yeah.
can see Randy Orton is almost being used almost like a gimmick now when he used to be like the legend killer. Do you know what I mean? He
Yeah,
was the
yeah.
person who was supposed to strike fear into you. And I just don't think, okay, let's not want those crazy or morally wrong stories back. But I don't know if there are those storylines anymore to get you grip. It just seems to be generic. Wrestler A doesn't like wrestler B. Let's fight.
Yeah, I think that what it was is obviously wrestling went through the transition to like the PG era. Now, obviously, for anybody again that doesn't know much about wrestling, wrestling was very, it was adult themed in reality. I
Mm.
mean, we talk about the mental storyline, but in reality, it was for adults. That's what the product was. That's who the product was aimed at. And then they went through the PG era where they kind of made it family friendly. They wanted families to turn up because it's an entertainment product. They want everybody. And then ultimately, it's a business decision. I think it was the wrong business decision with
It was also,
hindsight,
wasn't that
but it
part
was
of
a business
like no
decision.
blood, no headshots with the chairs, which I get that one
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
safety, right? I get that.
Yeah, yeah. The no headshot thing, the no blood thing, but again, I mean, you could use blood packets, I guess, if you wanted it to be. And funnily enough, I think there were a couple of stories of, do you know, Batista when he still was in the
Yeah,
WWE, he got fined a couple of times for blading,
yeah.
to try and make the matches more realistic because that's kind of where WWE went with it. But I think that at the time, in the early 2000s, the late 90s, WWE was a really, because it was controversial, it was almost like a bad thing. It was kind of like a taboo almost. Something that your parents didn't like you being into, like if you've got like when you're younger and you're into music that's got loads of swearing in it and you like your alternative bands or whatever it might be, it was something that was cool, basically. And that's where I think WWE started to go wrong. When it got to the PG era and it became a family friendly product, it stopped being cool for the average person. The average person wasn't into wrestling because, again, I mean, even if you ask my parents, they could give you the names of some wrestlers, but back from the early 2000s,
Yeah,
1990s,
yeah.
they couldn't give you a single name from today. And that's because wrestling isn't mainstream because they drove it to an audience that isn't mainstream. I think they put the product that they're producing isn't a product that you as a 25-year-old bloke would sit down and be like, oh, this is class, I'm going to watch this. And that's where I think the problem has lied with it.
I agree. I think that's part of it. But for me, it really is. I think like I said to you, I'm a sucker for the storyline and the rivalry. And it often they used to really build it up so it would then come to a head in SummerSlam or WrestleMania. It was
Yeah.
a proper slow build, slow build, slow build, and then yeah, we're gonna have it out at this pay-per-view. Now, every now and then, what I would do would be sign up to the WWE network and then watch that year's pay-per-views back to back. I haven't done it for a while, so maybe these things are there and I'm just not seeing it.
Yeah.
But I've watched recently, and I do like the New Day. I think they were fun.
Yeah.
Yeah, that they were fun. And it's that kind of thing. It's like, are there the characters anymore? I mean, I used to like, even when he was hated at the time, which I never got, but I used to like Roman Reigns. And was it the Shield? Was it the Shield he was in? Was that his group?
Yeah, yeah, it was the Shield. Yeah, yeah.
Oh, and we'll go back to what was Ric Flair, Batista, Triple H? What was theirs?
Evolution.
That's it. Yeah, I mean, come on, the bad boys, weren't they?
Even they had a great theme song as well. Sorry to go on, but it's like that was a wicked theme song as well.
A lot of them now, like I'll watch the AEW wrestling because that's on, and Chris Jericho, he's in it, isn't he? He's quite funny in it.
Yeah.
He was like a playboy in it. TNA, or what's it called? Then it became Impact. Sometimes the wrestling, because I don't know the wrestlers, I'll almost fast forward past that. But it's more to see like the promo work. I like, I like I said, I'm a sucker for the promo work. Oh, we've not even talked about some classic wrestlers like Sting and the Hardy Boys.
Oh God, yeah, Sting.
But Sting and was it Jeff Hardy, where Jeff Hardy turned up kind of under the influence for one match, wasn't it? And I think Sting
Yeah,
just got
he did.
pissed
Yeah,
off, didn't he? And kind of ended it.
that was at a pay per view. That was at a pay per view. Oh God, I can't remember what the pay per view was called. But basically, I think Jeff Hardy had turned up. Yeah, basically drugged off of his mind, and he came to the ring, and obviously he was really not in a good state. Like he was wobbling everywhere and all sorts. And basically, Sting just turns around and is just like, "I'm just going to have to end this as soon as possible." So he shoots on him and basically just ends the match instantly. The referee fast counts it, and that's that. But it was actually a pay per view that TNA had done, and that was supposed to be their main event. And Jeff Hardy's drugged up and has basically completely fucked the whole event
But you
up.
can see how angry Sting was. And the craziest
Oh
thing
yeah,
is, right, is Jeff Hardy's actually, again, he's another one of these, athletic high flyers. Could you imagine potentially what could have happened to him or Sting if he'd have tried to wrestle normally that night? If Sting hadn't
yeah,
have done
yeah.
that?
If he'd have just put, yeah, if he'd have just put it on and decided to have a show, he would have. Yeah, he
Yeah.
was he was off his mind. But there's been a lot of wrestlers that have kind of got into like drink and drugs and that sort of thing. And again, I think you mentioned it earlier about painkillers and that sort of thing. I think it must be properly rife because you have to remember wrestlers are actually away from home every single week. They are constantly on tour
Yeah.
basically because SmackDown and Raw are every Monday and every Friday, and they are week in week out. There isn't a break for
But
any
there's
of these
house
wrestlers,
shows
and
in
that's why as
between
well.
though as well.
Yeah, yeah, this is what I mean. There's house shows, then there's international tours that they go on. They basically spend no time at home. And ultimately, when you're doing that much, you need to recover for the purposes of storylines. You're going to get pumped with painkillers. You probably turn to drink because you're lonely as well. It must be hard. It must be hard.
God no. But could you imagine though, doing that when they've had a couple of drinks? I mean, I could barely keep my faculties when I've had one drink, right? Let alone imagine trying to do a wrestling match where it's so tightly choreographed and they we've seen some horrendous botches,
Oh,
Who was it in the women's one? What was it Becky Lynch? She got her nose bust open. We're talking about fine margins, even if they're totally sober, let alone what
yeah,
could happen
yeah.
if they're not. The reason mentioning TNA or Impact and Hardy's was Matt Hardy. Do you remember his character? I can't remember what they called him, but where he was slightly weird and going a bit crazy, and he would the delete, delete, delete.
Now, I can't actually remember this because I don't think I ever watched this, but I remember you telling me about his whole storyline like this.
Because they then did this grand thing. They filmed like a match that went through like, I think it was like an abandoned house, and then it was through a field, and there was a drone. I think he had a drone. Oh my God, I'm gonna need to look this up. He had a drone that would follow him, and yeah, it was. There was a match with fireworks going off. I think they were shooting fireworks at each other, and he was hiding under a boat, a canoe. I mean, this is the kind of level of, like I said, insanity we're talking about. But the fun element is what I'm saying. I think might be missing because we mentioned it in the last episode. But do you remember Eddie and Chavo?
Yeah,
The
yeah,
whole lie,
yeah.
we cheat, we steal. That whole, where they came
Yeah,
out in those
the
lowrider
gimmick.
cars.
But do you know what it is? I think as well. I think when WWE have tried to go PG, obviously they've had to get rid of some of the storylines that they would have used to touch. But I think the reason that people were so invested in wrestling is because they created brilliant storylines and they created characters that you were genuinely invested in, similar to reality TV shows. Whereas now, because they've decided to go PG with it, it's more focused on, we're going to try and make this, high flying and impressive wrestling, which is all well and good. However, you've taken out the human investment element of it. I'm not invested in any of the wrestlers that they've got nowadays because I don't know who they are. They've not been involved in any interesting storylines. Whereas the feuds that they used to have, used to be genuinely interesting. Like one of the most iconic feuds I can remember was we talked about Evolution,
Yeah, yeah,
didn't we?
yeah.
Was when Evolution broke up. It was
Ah,
Batista
yes,
turning on
yes,
Triple H.
yes.
They all broke up because of his world title. And so as a result, that was a brilliant storyline. Similarly, with Randy Orton breaking up with the rest of them, where Triple H turned on him because he won a world title. It
That's
was a
right.
brilliant storyline. You were invested in the group because they were so good. And you loved that. Like with Rey Mysterio, there wasn't a storyline where you didn't like that Rey Mysterio was involved in because he'd been built up to be so brilliant. Whereas now it's like the storylines are so poor and they're non-existent almost that you're just not invested in these characters.
Again, not know having too much first-hand experience nowadays. I mean, with me, I'll be honest, probably part of it could be, is it a nostalgia thing? You know, obviously I'm a little bit older than I was sort of when we're talking about the heyday of it now. Does that play a part? Possibly. Yeah, are they now, are the storylines, is the booking not as good as it was? Everything iconic we've mentioned in the past, there are so many few, and you know, we can't mention them all, but Undertaker, Kane.
Stone Cold and Rock.
Yeah, Stone Cold and The Rock. I think we said Kane and Shane McMahon. There's just so many fun characters from the past, but now are they, yeah, generic wrestlers who are gonna fill out the card until sort of the main event comes on at the end? I don't know. I don't know.
Well, do you know what it is as well? Is I found that WWE, as it started to get into its later years, in terms of me personally watching it, were more reliant on like old legends coming back to boost views and boost interest. So it was always reliant on like The Rock having the odd cameo, Shawn Michaels coming back for a match. The Undertaker, in reality, carried the WWE for a
For
really long
years.
period
Yeah.
on its old 50-something-year-old back that was busted to bits. And what they did is I think they relied too much on old characters coming back and old legends coming back that they forgot to build the new ones. And I think that they thought that a John Cena would just come around again, or that an Undertaker or that a new stable or whatever would come around again. And they didn't appreciate that they needed to put in work to create that person, as opposed to just assuming that somebody would fill the gap, if that makes sense.
Yeah, yeah, you're possibly right because I think I mentioned it about Roman Reigns. I remember people hating him. I remember him being booed. He was
Yeah,
he was
yeah,
Vince's chosen one, wasn't he? And I think he was being
yeah.
booed, and I didn't know why because he's got the look. I thought he moved well. Now I'm not an expert. Maybe he didn't move that well. Maybe his wrestling wasn't great. Was it that Vince pushed him too quickly?
Yeah, that's what it was. It was artificial. So I don't know if you remember as well, there was a period where Batista came back to WWE. I think it was like 2014-15 period. And I'm pretty sure he won a Royal Rumble and then got booed despite being what was at the time like the face. So people should have loved him, but they didn't. And that's because he's a wrestler that's come back who'd left. Nobody really liked him. Nobody wanted him as a face. And then he's been pushed to win the Royal Rumble. It's like that reliance on having a big name has actually inadvertently screwed them over because they've not built someone that the audience will love. They've just decided to push someone because they think nostalgia will be enough to do it. And it's not. Like, each generation of wrestling fan up until probably 2010 has a set of wrestlers that they loved. Like, you will talk about Ultimate Warrior, Hulk Hogan, Macho Man. I will turn around and say Stone Cold, The Rock, Eddie Guerrero. And then if you're kind of further on from that, you'd go on to say your CM Punks and that sort of thing. Whereas now, I could not pick any wrestler in reality that has been built to that level. And in reality, even CM Punk had to do the work himself because he was unfavored by WWE.
Well, actually, like I said, been recording Raw, and at the moment, it is still the main people that only seem to appear is Randy Orton.
And this is the thing, you know what? Maybe Vince's biggest downfall was allowing the writers to take control because we know that Vince McMahon's definitely not in control of storyline anymore because nobody's shagging corpses or like doing all of this crazy sex stuff in the middle of a public venue. But you know what it is, maybe it is like the lack of controversy in terms of storyline pulling people back in now, because in reality, what are the redeeming factors to watch wrestling again? When you look at the fans that used to watch wrestling, how are you ever going to claw those fans back considering the product that they were used to? When you look at that the 90s, early 2000s period, even into kind of the 2010s,
Yeah.
wrestling was still half decent. But when you look past that, how are you pulling those fans back, the ones that you lost when they were used to the characters like your Stone Colds, like your Eddie Guerreros, even your JBLs? Even the mid card wrestlers at the time, you had people like the Hurricane who were horrifically gimmicky, but brilliant characters. You like them to bolster the rosters, and that's the thing. I just think there's no draw anymore for people to go back to WWE specifically.
I think also now because you've got AEW who are now, it feels like a fairly credible
Taking
competitor, I
over
think.
almost.
Yeah,
You could see them taking over.
yeah, because TNA wasn't really, and then Impact didn't really do it. But AEW, since they've come back, and they've got a few of the like the wrestlers now. So we said Chris Jericho. Who else is in there? Oh, who's just gone there? Now I'm going to get it the wrong
There
way.
was one of the ones from the Shield. Dean Ambrose, I think, is
Yeah,
at
Dean Ambrose is there. I
AEW
think
now, isn't he?
We mentioned CM Punk, but I'm going to get it the wrong way because they've changed his name round. So is it Daniel Bryan or Brian? I think he's now Brian Danielson in that.
Yeah, yeah,
I think
yeah.
he's
That's
in
it.
there.
That's it.
And the thing is, these are wrestlers that people watched in WWE. So I'm like tuning in because I want to see. I've got to get it right way. Brian Danielson in there because I remember him being in WWE and being good. You know, Dean Ambrose. So they've now got probably a bit of competition.
I mean, Billy Gunn's also signed with AEW as well.
The Yes Man himself.
Christian is signed with AEW. I'm actually just having a look at the roster now. Cody
That
Rhodes,
was it. Cody
Christian,
Rhodes.
but he's
Yep.
called
Yep.
Christian Cage. Cody Rhodes is there. Colt Cabana.
Who was it? I don't know that one.
Bit of a throwback. Dustin Rhodes. Dustin Rhodes is Gold Dust. I
Oh
don't know
yes,
if you
yeah, yeah,
remember
yeah,
him.
yeah,
He
yeah,
used
yeah,
to paint himself
yeah, yeah,
gold.
yeah, yeah.
Bit again,
No,
bit of a
I meant
strange one.
Colt Cabana. Did you say? I didn't know who that was.
Yeah, Colt Cabana. He also had I'm pretty sure he's got a podcast or had a podcast where he used to interview wrestlers. Jack Swagger, but now he's Jake Hager. It's great. It's basically like they've got a Scrabble board and they've got to make different names out of the same word. Mark Henry, Matt Hardy.
It's like do you remember in Pez Soccer where they didn't have the licenses? So it's like like London Blues and Manchester Reds.
Amazing, amazing. But yeah, the Big Show is signed, but under his real name of Paul Wright.
Oh really?
You know what? Again, it's pretty impressive considering how. See what they're doing. Sting is signed as well.
Oh
Unbelievable.
blimey.
But what they're doing is they're ultimately picking up old talent to bolster the pool, and then they're going to keep with the talent that they're building, if that makes sense. And you know what? It's pretty impressive as well because nowadays most wrestling promotions have actually got just as big of female rosters as they do men's
Yeah,
ones.
definitely, definitely.
Again, you know what? I don't know how we haven't spoken about him, and he's not a wrestler, but Jim Ross, commentator.
If we're getting into that, you've got Paul Heyman.
Paul Heyman, oh, brilliant, brilliant character Paul Heyman was. Actually seems like an arsehole in real life as well, but I don't know whether or not he just keeps the character in real life or if that just, it's just him.
But that's it. Look at us again. We're talking about classic kind of groupings of classic people from the past. Now, my view is I don't think it's necessarily wrong to keep the old guard in because why not make them almost like the mentors? You don't have to necessarily make them wrestle, but why can't they be like the mentors or the managers of the modern wrestlers? Kind of like
Yeah.
Rocky and Creed in in the new films. Rocky mentors Adonis. Actually, we talk about sort of the classics. You've got Charlotte Flair, who we haven't mentioned her either.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I don't think we even mentioned really Ric Flair as well.
No,
But yeah, it's like lineage of like imagine turning around and becoming like second generation wrestlers. But there's a couple of families that have been in wrestling. I actually think, if I remember rightly, I'm pretty sure. Do you know Dominic, who we told was involved in the Rey Mysterio
oh yeah, yeah,
storyline?
yeah, yeah.
Dominic Mysterio actually wrestles in WWE now. I'm pretty
Oh,
sure.
does he? Does he?
Yeah, I think it's weird as well because he's like 6'1", so he's obviously not little. But yeah, he's actually a pretty big dude. But I'm pretty certain that he's actually a professional wrestler now.
Oh, but
Yeah,
actually,
yeah. Performs currently signed to WWE where he performs on Raw brand.
now we're talking about that whole Eddie thing as well. What I found weird at the time though was how they then used Vicky Guerrero.
Yeah, yeah. Very, very
That's
strange.
odd, isn't that? Wasn't it? That felt again. It just felt uncomfortable, even at the time. I think.
Yeah, but do you know what it was? Is they kind of played on a couple of deaths. I don't know if you remember when Eddie died again, related to. They had a storyline between Rey Mysterio, who obviously was Eddie Guerrero's like best friend in WWE, probably towards real life as well. They were probably really
Yeah,
close.
yeah.
But there was a storyline with Randy Orton afterwards, and Randy Orton cut a promo in the middle of the ring where it was like looking at Rey Mysterio, and he turned around and he was just like, "Eddie's not up there in heaven; he's down there in hell."
That's right. Yeah.
And they justified it afterwards by saying, "Oh, Eddie would have wanted the show to go on. They wouldn't have minded." I'm just like, Yeah, I know, but like a little bit of respect. Like the guy was actually a fucking legend, and you've put a bloke on stage turning around talking to his one of his best mates in the business about how he's burning in hell. Like it is a little bit fucked up. Like it is exploitation. It's
Yeah,
emotional
yeah.
exploitation,
The
really.
the difference being, I kind of almost related it to a soap opera. In a soap opera, they are actors and it's a character opposed to a real person, but Eddie died. And they're
Yeah,
using
yeah,
his actual
exactly.
death. It's not like his
Yeah.
persona in the ring died. He died, and then they're using it. It was a commodity. It just shows how much they are than just a commodity.
Well, in actual fact as well, to get a little bit to the darker side, I don't know if it still works like this, but the last time I heard, I'm pretty sure that WWE wrestlers are like private contractors. So it means that because they're not employees, WWE doesn't have to provide medical insurance and that sort of thing for them. So they get paid as contractors, basically self-employed. They pay for their own hotels, their own travel, all of that nonsense. They pay for their own insurance and all of that sort of thing. And basically, it's to get WWE out of cutting the cost for it. Again, don't hold me to that's the way that they still do it now, but again, that's the way it was until very, very recently. You know, they've got the whole wellness policy and that sort of thing, but again, it's like, well, you know, you practice what you preach, don't you? Like,
I mean, I think we should look at starting to wrap up, but I know we could probably go on all night. But I was going to ask, was there a couple of funny things or standout moments? There are a couple of funny moments I know we've spoken about. One is, do you remember when Vince storms into the ring and does his quads in and
yeah,
collapse?
he literally
I mean,
rips
the
both
guy.
quads.
To be fair to him, I mean, he styled it out. He was laying down in the ring, but oh my god, if it was a footballer, or even me, they'd be rolling over about 20 times, screaming the whole house down. But he just carries on his argument with the wrestlers, whoever it was in the ring at the time, wasn't it?
The thing is, as well, that was all legitimate. Like he actually was fuming because they botched the ending of the one of the biggest events of the year, and he's run into the
Ah,
ring,
that's
ripped
right. Yeah,
both his
yeah.
quads, and then sat there like a small child because he physically can't
But
stand
you know, he
up.
does that walk. It's that walk of his as he's coming down, and I can't remember the name of the wrestler, but that guy, the guy is just brilliant. What? Please look at it on YouTube. The guy, I think it was in a Royal Rumble, comes running down, and then dives under the ring. He trips, and
Titus O'Neil.
that's it. Yeah, he dives under the ring. I will
he,
never
he falls
not.
he falls like 20 or 30 feet, doesn't he? And then slides directly under the
And
ring. And even the
disappears.
commentator's like, oh shit.
But proper disappears. It's not like even his legs are hanging out. That's one of those videos where if I watch it, I can't just watch it the once. You're watching it on repeat.
Yeah, there have been a couple of funny moments. I think that in terms of storyline and that sort of thing, I always enjoyed John Cena's like early appearances in WWE because he in reality was probably the generation that I started to watch wrestling properly, if that makes sense. Like I came just out of like the Rock Stone Cold era and kind of into the John Cena era, if that makes sense. And so a lot of the storylines with him I loved. I never forget when he introduced the spinny belt. I went and got
Yes, I
replicas of that.
remember you having it.
Brilliant.
Yes, I remember you having that. Yeah.
Yeah, the spinny belts. I remember you bought me like a couple of the chains. I'm pretty sure I've still got them.
That's right. Yes, I
I'll have to go
did.
pick them out.
Yes, yes, I did. I remember, I think, ordering them from the WWE website, I think. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, they were bloody brilliant. I remember. Yeah, John Cena was fantastic. I remember there was great memories with that. Barring that, yeah, I mean, like there was a couple of Royal Rumbles that I really really enjoyed. Again, I think I remember Eddie Guerrero winning that WrestleMania. I think it was a year before he died, if I remember rightly. I was really really young at the time. But him winning that WrestleMania was brilliant. And I think we spoke about it in the last podcast because it was like you said, the ticker tape
Yeah.
was
Yeah.
surrounding the arena. Like he jumped into the crowd to
Yeah.
celebrate with his
Yeah.
mum.
And he just
I mean, at the time,
looked genuinely happy. It was like
yeah,
that's
yeah,
the thing.
yeah.
It was almost like it's almost like he wasn't that wasn't an acting, that he was so happy to have won that belt.
But that's the thing as well. Do you know what it was as well back then? It kind of almost did mean something because as much as it was all scripted, it was all fake. They genuinely pushed the best talent to the top.
Mm,
So if
yeah.
you were good in the ring, you got pushed to the top. Whereas what happened is like titles started to bounce about between people that you genuinely didn't give a shit about, who weren't particularly gifted in the ring. And so the value of it was just less. It used to feel like when somebody won a title, it was an impressive feat because they'd finally made it, and then all of a sudden titles chop and change in a night and you're like, oh, it just doesn't,
Well,
there's
and
no emotion,
they
there's no
used to change hands.
feeling.
Yeah, they often used to change hands in just the normal shows where it felt like, especially for the top ones, that should be it at one of the pay-per-view events.
Yeah, yeah, always should have been at a pay-per-view. So I think if I remember rightly, when Edge retired, I think they put the belt on Christian, who was like his partner at the time, and they used him because But then he dropped the belt like a week later to Randy Orton on Raw. It wasn't even on a pay per view, and I just thought, well, what the fuck was the point? Like, you just shouldn't have done it. And again, it just devalued the whole product because there was
Absolutely.
just no reason to be invested
Because
because
you
the
should be the
people that
best
were
of the
good
best.
still weren't going to get rewarded.
You should be the best of the best. You should at least hold it for a month, right?
Yeah, and I know, like bloody hell.
I've kind of got two more things to say. One is, I think if I was ever a wrestler, which yeah, obviously that's going to happen. If I was ever a wrestler, the one thing I would say is, or one bit of advice I would give to wrestlers, if your opponent at the end, especially if you've beaten them, offers to shake your hand, don't shake that hand. Don't shake that hand. They're gonna sucker punch you. I've learned that. Don't shake the hand at the end. It's not many times they're gonna lift your hand aloft and turn to the crowd. No, they've got something underhand brewing there.
It's true, isn't it? Like there are so many cliches when it comes to wrestling, and you know what? Sorry, just before you go on, maybe that's what it is as well. Maybe there are so many cliches and it is so predictable. That's also why people aren't drawn anymore.
Well, if we're talking about unpredictability, then let's not also forget though some of the other greats who have been in WWE, like Donald Trump. He's won a match, hasn't he? Hasn't Donald Trump won a match?
You know what? I'm actually pretty sure you're right. As fucked up as that is, yeah,
We've
I'm
had
I'm pretty sure.
we've had like David Arquette was in it.
Floyd Mayweather,
Wayne Rooney, I think, was in the crowd. Didn't they? They wanted.
Wayne
Who
Rooney
was it?
was in
Was it
it.
Triple H was starting on? I think with Rooney.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure Wayne Rooney like bitch slapped a wrestler basically during like a show in the UK. Oh, they had Steve-O and Chris Pontius from Jackass were actually in WWE as well. At one point, they got beaten up by. Do you remember Umaga, who was the guy with the tattoos
Oh
all over
yes,
his
yes,
back?
yeah.
But they actually got properly brutalized by him because Steve-O, funnily enough, if you want to check this out, has put a video on YouTube about his time in the WWE, and he said that they were really like on drugs basically when they were at the show, and he said that he forgot when he was supposed to stay still. So Umaga got to the point where he like legitimately beat him up to make him realize that he needed to stay on the floor, and he talks about how painful it actually was, like taking legitimate kicks and punches from this humongous guy.
Remember, there were stories of a couple of wrestlers who were actually just assholes and would treat, especially new people, actually quite roughly and badly in the ring. I think I can't remember who
Yeah,
it
yeah.
was.
Well, actually, one story which actually backfired and it links back to the show that we watched was I'm pretty sure it was Hardcore Holly. So I think it was in a match with Brock Lesnar. Hardcore Holly sandbagged Brock Lesnar when he was like power bombing him, and
Mm.
sandbagging, again, for anybody who doesn't know the terminology, is where you basically don't work with another wrestler. So all the moves are obviously choreographed, and sometimes it is as strong as you can be. It's difficult to pick another 6'5" bloke up with just your own strength. You need a bit of help from them. So Brock Lesnar went to powerbomb him. Hardcore Holly sandbagged Brock Lesnar and refused to go mid move. So Brock Lesnar dropped him on his neck. And I'm pretty sure he
Right. Yeah.
broke a vertebrae or like shattered
Yeah.
like a vertebrae in his back or neck or something. And that was it. Injured, almost out. Stone Cold, I mean, actually had broken his neck. I can't remember how that worked though, if that was something that somebody had done in the ring. But yeah, there are a couple of instances of people being proper asses.
Got it here. Sorry, actually going back. Yeah, so Donald Trump. So he's had a history. So he hosted WrestleMania 4 and 5 in '88 and '89 at Trump Plaza. And after that, he appeared in WrestleMania 7. While also being interviewed by former wrestler and politician Jesse Ventura at WrestleMania 20. His contribution to the WWE continued in 2007 when he stepped foot in the squared circle and got actively involved in a storyline called, and this says it all, the Battle of the Billionaires. And it was that the deal was that either Donald Trump or Vince would have their heads shaved if their competitor lost their match at WrestleMania 23. Trump had Bobby Lashley and Vince McMahon had Umaga with Stone Cold Steve Austin as a special guest referee. Lashley won the match, and so McMahon got the haircut. Which actually reminds me of another thing I've learned all my years of watching, and if I've wrestled, all my advice is if another wrestler is the referee, that's the longest count to 3 you're ever going to get.
I was actually just looking at some wrestlers that apparently are supposed to be, again, arses in real life. And there's a couple of instances of like people actually getting like beaten up in locker rooms. So apparently Booker T got the best of Batista.
All right.
Chris Jericho got the best of Goldberg, which you definitely wouldn't have
Wow.
thought.
Yeah.
Because I'm pretty sure as well that they run like a kangaroo court where the Undertaker was like the judge, jury, and executioner. So if wrestlers were ever assholes in real life, I think it was the Miz, if I remember rightly, that had to change like outside of the locker room for like a whole month.
Mm.
And that was for some behaviour. I think the Hardy Boys got reprimanded because they took Kane's seat on an aeroplane. And like they were forced to like buy everyone in the locker room booze or something like that. And apparently, yeah, Undertaker was like supreme authority who would impose the sanctions on you.
But wasn't there a flight where all hell broke loose and they don't talk about that?
Oh yeah, wasn't it something to do with Kurt Angle wrestling someone?
I can't remember, but I think yeah, someone obviously started on the other, and it's like gone down in history as a flight they don't talk about or something. But yeah, literally sounded like it was an actual like 10, 20 man brawl on the flight.
Yeah, where everybody got into it with everyone. But yeah, I actually do think I remember that. I think there's probably a couple of podcasts online where some wrestlers have probably broken silence on it.
Here we go. From prowrestlingstories.com. Yeah, the plane ride from hell. It was in 2002. Oh, it was spelled the end of 2 careers in WWE. And what was the story? So they just finished the tour of Britain with the taping of Insurrection pay-per-view in London. Vince at the time was chartering flights. We weren't on commercial flights. We'd rent a whole plane, and they had a 747 all to themselves. So it meant not just the wrestlers, but the whole TV crew were on there. So we have every cameraman, all the girls that make the costumes, tour managers, everybody. Now with that comes a full and open bar. And what I mean by that is a plane filled with alcoholic wrestlers at the end of a grueling tour. So think about it. It's like the last day of school. Let me scoot down a little bit. And then here we go. Yeah, Mr. Perfect versus Brock Lesnar tussle on the plane ride from hell. Kurt Hennig and Brock Lesnar were close friends who travelled together, both hailing from Minnesota. But during the long flight, they got restless, leading to what started as a friendly amateur wrestling style takedown tussle after Kurt insisted he was a better grappler than the younger Brock. I mean, let's remember, this is on a 747. I could barely walk down the aisle and they're having a fight. So they said they weren't fighting at first. They're very competitive. So they're just scraping along, like messing around. And something happened where it got serious. It didn't come to blows. But you know the opening they have on planes, those openings are the emergency exit rows. Now Brock's wrestling shooter and Kurt's a shooter kind too. So they took it seriously. They didn't want to give in to each other. They went at it so hard that they almost popped open the emergency exit 25 to 30,000 feet in the air. Wow. Can you imagine that on a flight, 30,000 up? Apparently Scott Hall lost consciousness on the plane ride.
Could you imagine if they'd have actually bust through the door, the fear that would have been on the person on the ground? Imagine that, getting hit by a fucking Brock Lesnar who's fallen from 20,000 feet.
Oh man, I think we better leave it there. Because we're in danger of going on longer than a pay-per-view. I think so.
Yeah, this is like a Tarantino movie. This is.
I know we've said it before. Yeah, let's come back to it. Let's come back to it. Maybe what we should do, right? Maybe we should pick like a WrestleMania. We should watch like a WrestleMania from like the mid '80s and then one from the 2000s, and maybe we should compare them. Maybe we should have a look back and see how things have changed, and we'll do our little review on those. Maybe we should do that in the future.
Yeah, we watch like a 90s one, a 2000s one, and then one from the 2010s, and we compare them all and see where they've gone downhill.
Yeah. All right, cool. Is there anything else you want to say on the wrestling before we wrap up?
No, I don't think so. Have you got any final comments?
Oh, just one more.
It doesn't matter if you have any final comments.
God, I walked right into that. One more thing. The only other one I remember I wanted to, because again, I remember him from a game, and you're talking about Goldberg made me think he does a spear, doesn't he? And Rhino, because I
Yeah.
just remember Rhino had legs the size of about 5 tree trunks, wasn't it?
Yeah, he did. Yeah,
He the guy,
yeah,
man.
elephant leg.
The guy, yeah. But no, I think that's all I want to say. So yeah, if you've liked the episode, please leave us a review. Get in touch with us. You can contact us at castingviewspod@gmail.com. Give us a tweet at castingviews. And let's hope I don't butcher this like I butchered the introduction. We know there's a lot of podcasts from which you can choose. So we thank you for listening to Casting Views. Hello, and welcome to another episode of Casting Views, a podcast where we're going to pick a topic each week. Oh, fuck it. Right. It's my turn now, for fuck's sake. Hello, and welcome to another episode of Casting Views, a podcast hosted by myself. Oh, fuck it. I said I didn't want to do host. Right. Fuck's sake. We're still going to take 10 minutes. Fuck's sake. Right. Hello, and welcome to Casting Views, a podcast with myself, Dan, and my nephew, Lou. Oh my god, no, I'm just gonna. Do you know what? We're gonna go back to how we normally do it,
Yeah,
all
just
right?
stick with the original one, and then you can script one for next week.
Hello. Oh my god, what's the matter with me?
I'm
Jesus
so going to
Christ.
reference this when it starts.